Welcome back, everybody. Ask the Collective 18, Rich Brubaker, founder of Collective Responsibility. It's great to have you back. It is a sweltering day out in Shanghai, so we have the air conditioning on, so apologies for the background noise. Today we're covering a single topic. It's a question I've been asked quite frequently over the years, partly because I've been traveling around the region so much, is if you're going to be focused on sustainability and you want to be an entrepreneur, so you can be a social entrepreneur, where should you be? Shanghai, Hong Kong, or Singapore? We're not even going to bother with the question card or we're just going to go straight into it. So this is actually a really interesting question, and I'm going to preface it by saying, from a contextual standpoint, this depends on who you are and what your goals are. I'm going to make a basic assumption that you are either an outsider, so you're non-Asian, and you've spent some time in Asia already, so you understand one or more of the markets. And you likely come from either a business background or a nonprofit background. I won't talk about the government side for this. What has been very interesting is that over the last 8 to 10 years, how each of these cities, the countries, and the region itself has changed so much. And how that has basically, over the course of really the last 3 to 5 years, my answer is changing more and more. So I'm gonna go back 5 years, 7 years. At that time, my first organization, a nonprofit, had just been licensed. We were just coming out of the gray zone. We were in a space where actually things were going really well in the nonprofit space. So if you're a socially minded entrepreneur who is in charities, then things are getting very interesting for China. In Hong Kong, but at the same time in Hong Kong, like nothing was really new. The space was very established. The process was there. I mean, 1 week, and you've got your business license. A couple of months, and you have basically your charitable status, so your tax-free status. And you have a strong base of philanthropists, lawyers, accountants, everyone that you could think of that you would want to work with and engage with to get things done. In Singapore, things were also getting very interesting. The government had kind of started this new investment scheme or investment incentive to bring in the global nonprofits, and that was going back maybe 6 or 8 years ago. And things were really buzzing then. You had World Vision, you had a lot of really big NGOs really look to that space. They start up a co-shared space, they were given subsidies, and it was really bringing a lot of people in. That's when Singapore really started to kick. But at the same time, the Singapore hub started at about the same time. I think it was like 5, 6 years ago that Grace started that. So the ecosystem was really developing around Singapore. And for the next 3 years, I would say, between Hong Kong and Singapore, the ecosystem in Singapore was just so alive. Like Hong Kong was definitely trying to find its space. They were much more focused on the investment. And so if I was looking for investment, I would have been in Hong Kong. But to get work done, to be part of an ecosystem, Singapore is a really interesting place at that time that I thought was, if you're gonna go in and you're gonna try something, go to Singapore, because it's beautiful year-round, there's an ecosystem, there's a legal framework, there's a lot of buzz around the system. And also, if you can get it right in Singapore, if you can find your model, well then you can spread around the region. And that was the theory. Hong Kong, on the other hand, 5, 6, 7 years ago, really got into social entrepreneurship from the investment side, as I was mentioning earlier, and you had a lot of the impact investment conversations happening there. Now, if you had a great idea, if you had a great platform, if you could show impact, the ability to get money at that time was actually pretty good, because a lot of the investors were very early. Ashoka was just coming in. You had RS Group, you had LGT, you had SoAsia, which were kind of the 3 brands that everyone knew. But a lot of the investment banks themselves were holding symposiums or doing research or really trying to figure out how to help their high net worth individuals. And then the families also want to get into this because they kind of viewed the next generation of businesses to be more socially, environmentally, or economically balanced. And that led to a really interesting dynamic where if you had a great business plan, if you had something that was fundable, Hong Kong was actually probably the best place to be. Again, in part because you could set up there so quickly, and because office space, there's a lot of shared office spaces already popping up at that time. The ecosystem around entrepreneurship was very strong. Social entrepreneurship was growing, and that was really led by someone named KK and Patrick and Philo. They were down there starting up the Good Lab, which was founded by Ada Wong. And that was all really great, but this is kind of preceding the Hong Kong Fund. This was preceding really any talks about impact. And that's where actually in Hong Kong I got a little bit hung up, in the sense of Hong Kong was and still is, an island off the south of the mainland of China. And for me, the challenge was, in a similar way to Singapore, that there was a very confined market. Unlike Singapore, though, you couldn't spread around the region very easily. Your next step was definitely the mainland. And that became kind of one of my questions was, well, if I want to be in the mainland anyway, if my goal is to be in the mainland anyway, why would I be in Hong Kong as a starting point? And so actually what you've seen in the last 3 to 5 years is a lot of the social entrepreneurs, not all of them, but a lot of them, they've really focused on Hong Kong. They've scaled across Hong Kong. They developed real depth in Hong Kong, and that's fantastic, because what we're seeing is a lot of groups that were really kind of formative in starting that wouldn't have survived necessarily trying to scale through China, because most can't, let's be honest. They were able to just remain focused on Hong Kong, get the work done, and so you've seen a lot less failures there than you have seen in Shanghai. And so I'm going to segue now into Shanghai, because Shanghai is where I've been for the last 14 plus years. It's also where I have viewed, and I've been fortunate to really participate in the development of the economy, watch the real estate grow, watch how the cultures really change. And for me, this is where things get really interesting, because like Singapore, in a different way, but like Singapore, I think China offers the scalability that you can find nowhere else. The nice thing that makes it a little bit easier about Shanghai is that when you're scaling across China, there's so many very accessible cities in, say, just outside Shanghai, just outside Beijing, just outside Guangzhou or Shenzhen, no matter where your base is. So the mainland, but I'll focus, more on Shanghai. You can do a lot of things here, and if you prove in Shanghai, then you're allowed to kind of concentric ring out. The only difference I would say from the scalability of Singapore is the fact that Indonesia, Thailand, Malaysia, Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam, they're all very different markets, very different cultures, very different economies, very different legal structures. So in a sense, yes, you have the scalability of Southeast Asia or ASEAN, but you have so many more legal, cultural, economic barriers that you have to bust through. Where in China, once you set up, you can go. You don't have to have different legal structures. Also, economically, your base can grow because your clients will grow with you. The challenge, though, in China was that registering as a social entrepreneur, as a social enterprise, was very difficult. The first B Corps really started in Singapore and Hong Kong. We had the first one here last year, a couple years behind the others. But because the challenge of nonprofits in China, that's really impacted the social entrepreneurs in China. Which is to say, there really is no easy way to get a nonprofit license. It's quite easy to get the for-profit license. It'll take you 2 months. You'll have to invest or commit to a sum of money. You'll have to get an office space. So co-sharing can be kind of difficult sometimes depending on what district you're in. But at the end of the day, where China really takes it home is the fact that they have the scalability of need and of economy. That if you're able to actually bring your idea, prove it, show impact, the scale is here. The other thing that's nice about Shanghai, that is also true of Hong Kong, is the money is also here. Now, it's definitely been getting tighter. The impact funds aren't necessarily the bigger players anymore. It's much more about the traditional sources of financing, friends, family, fools, angels, and then you go through the normal rounds. But if you have a clean air, clean food, clean transportation, clean energy, clean something, or you have a more equitable education, healthcare, whatever it may be, and you can prove that your app, your product, your service model can fit the Chinese market, starting in Shanghai, starting in Shenzhen, wherever it may be, then what you're going to find is that the traditional investors, the traditional economy is much more open to you scaling across than it would be if you were just based in Hong Kong or just based in Singapore. So for me, honestly, I think that Shanghai, in my context, is the best city to definitely start and definitely to look to scale my social entrepreneurs or my social ventures. However, Singapore for me is second, in part because of the draw for me personally to the idea that I could scale across so many other regions, so many other cultures, so many other, now they don't all need my stuff, they don't all need my help, I get that. But that's also part of being the entrepreneur, is to figure out in so many different contexts, in so many different ways, where you can provide value. And so I think in that sense, Singapore provides a really close second for me to Shanghai. Hong Kong for me, honestly, the challenge right now politically is one thing, It's something that I know a lot are talking about. But for me, at the end of the day, I really feel for the work that I'm doing right now, I'm better off being in Shanghai than in Hong Kong. However, I would say that if the decision between Hong Kong and Singapore, it'd be a much different struggle for me. Because for me, I really view China as my primary source of scale versus ASEAN as the starting point. And so therefore, my choice between Shanghai and Hong Kong is a little bit different. Now, having said that, really, it's changing all the time. And I think this is why it's really important for you, the aspiring entrepreneur, or you, the hopeful scaling entrepreneur, to really assess where your business is best placed. Where are your customers, where you bring the most value, and where is the structure, the ecosystem, the legal structure, the accounting, all that. Where is that best place to support your growth? Because while I'm kind of pointing out the benefits of most of the markets using that, the reality is that there's a lot of downside sometimes to the fact that, Hong Kong is very expensive for living. Singapore can be quite expensive for finding labor. Shanghai can be quite restrictive, and the ecosystem isn't quite as collaborative as Singapore and Hong Kong. And it's really important to know all these different facets before you make your own decision. And so for me, that's why, honestly, Asia overall is just the most fascinating place to be, because it's changing all the time. There's clearly a need for various products, services, technologies, new business models, new ideas, new people. It's bringing in, at the regional level, some of the best talent. And if they're already here, it's bringing them together, and that's fantastic. And then it's also bringing scalability. So no matter where you start, the reality is that if you're really a true hustler, a true entrepreneur, you will start to figure out where you start is not necessarily where you should finish. Maybe it is best in Hong Kong because you can get set up really quickly, you can find a co-shared workspace, you can find an angel or an impact investor who will give you that money you need to basically take you to Shanghai and Singapore next. Great. Maybe you make a jump in another way. Maybe you use Singapore as a jump to India, or India as a jump to some, but this is where you, as the entrepreneur, the aspiring or the current entrepreneur, really need to sit down and break down what the pros and cons of each city are. So I hope that you found that interesting. I hope that you found it useful. I really hope you didn't get offended if you're from Shanghai, Hong Kong, or Singapore. I love all cities. The food's amazing. The people are fantastic. I really have nothing negative to say. At the end of the day, it just comes down to understanding myself, what I want to get done, and what are the best places for me to start, what are the next steps, and then moving forward. And I just hope that that framework that I ran you through helps you understand my mindset, and then maybe it'll help you develop your own mindset for your own idea or for your own enterprise. So thank you very much. And remember, if you enjoyed this, please like, comment, and share.